Space, the final frontier, 4 words. And with them, one of the most unlikely television shows in history announced its intentions to the world. Star Trek premiered on NBC in September 1966, got canceled after 3 seasons, and then spent the next 6 decades becoming one of the most influential franchises in the history of human storytelling. Today, 15 facts about the original Star Trek. From the network that tried to kill it twice, to the kiss that triggered a wave of angry letters, to the actor who almost wasn't Spock. Stick around for the bonus. It involves hundreds of thousands of envelopes and the one time in television history that viewers genuinely changed a network's mind. Star Trek aired on NBC from September 1966 to June 1969. Created by Gene Roddenberry, a former LAPD officer turned television writer, it starred William Shatner as Captain Kirk and Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. 79 episodes, 3 seasons, canceled due to low ratings. Then syndication happened, then the films. Then The Next Generation, then 9 more series and counting. The show NBC gave up on became a cultural institution that outlasted every executive who canceled it. Fact 1. NBC rejected the first pilot, then did something almost unprecedented. In 1964, Roddenberry pitched Star Trek and received a pilot commission. The resulting episode featured a thoughtful captain named Christopher Pike, a female first officer, and a pointy-eared alien science officer. NBC rejected it. Too cerebral, too slow, too unusual. Their notes specifically flagged the female first officer and the alien character. But then NBC did something almost unheard of. They rejected the pilot and commissioned a second one. Networks almost never fund 2 pilots for the same show. Star Trek got that rare second chance, produced Where No Man Has Gone Before, and this time NBC bought the series. The show they called Too Cerebral went on to define intelligent science fiction on television for generations. Fact 2. Spock was almost cut entirely. When NBC ordered the second pilot, their notes included a specific request: get rid of the alien with the pointed ears. Executives were convinced that Spock's vaguely satanic appearance would disturb religious viewers and generate advertiser pressure. Roddenberry refused. He fought the network directly and kept the character. Spock not only survived, he became the most recognizable character in the franchise and one of the most iconic figures in American popular culture. The character NBC wanted removed became the reason millions of people watched. Fact 3. The female first officer was removed, but never left. The female first officer in the rejected pilot was played by Majel Barrett, Roddenberry's girlfriend and later his wife. NBC's objection: test audiences didn't believe a woman could hold authority over men on a starship bridge. Barrett was removed from the role. She returned as Nurse Christine Chapel and remained a fixture in the franchise for decades, eventually voicing the computer in multiple Star Trek series. The character deemed unbelievable in 1964 was simply ahead of what the network was willing to sell. The actress never left. She just changed seats. Fact 4. The kiss that made television history. In the 1968 episode Plato's Stepchildren, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura share a kiss, widely cited as the first interracial kiss on American network television. The writers structured it carefully. The characters were being forced to kiss by telekinetic aliens, giving NBC cover to allow the scene. NBC still requested an alternate version where the characters turn away at the last moment. Shatner and Nichols reportedly chose to subtly ruin every alternate take, crossing their eyes, breaking character, ensuring the kissing version was the only usable footage. The episode generated significant angry mail. It also generated more positive letters than any episode in the series. Nichelle Nichols later recalled that the most moving responses came from Black viewers who wrote to say they had never seen themselves represented that way on television before. Fact 5. Martin Luther King Jr. convinced Nichols to stay. After the first season, Nichols decided to leave the show. She had been offered a Broadway role and was seriously considering it. She informed Roddenberry of her intention to resign. That weekend, she attended an NAACP fundraiser where a fan wanted to meet her. That fan was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King told her that Star Trek was the only show he and his wife allowed their children to stay up to watch. He told her that Uhura was not a maid or a stereotype. She was a lieutenant on a starship, a full and equal member of the command crew. He told her she could not leave. Nichols withdrew her resignation on Monday morning. She stayed with the show for the rest of its run and reprised the role in 6 feature films. Fact 6. The show was never profitable during its original run. Star Trek never cracked the top 50 in Nielsen ratings during any of its 3 seasons. NBC considered it a financial disappointment throughout, which is precisely why they canceled it twice and slashed the 3rd season budget so severely. The The show that would eventually generate an estimated $10 billion in franchise revenue was a money-losing proposition during its entire original broadcast run. The turnaround came through syndication, where local stations purchased cheap rerun rights. Broadcast in different time slots across different markets, often multiple times per week, Star Trek found the audience it had never found on NBC. The franchise that changed science fiction wasn't profitable until it was already canceled. Fact 7. Roddenberry used science fiction as a cloaking device. Star Trek was made during one of the most turbulent decades in American history: the Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam, the Cold War, political assassinations. Roddenberry used the distance of alien planets and distant futures to address all of it directly. The episode Let That Be Your Last Battlefield featured a planet at war because one population was black on the left side and white on the right, the other population the reverse. Episodes addressed racism, imperialism, the arms race, and mob mentality, all wrapped in stories about imaginary worlds where censors couldn't easily object. It was the same strategy Rod Serling had used on The Twilight Zone: science fiction as camouflage. The further from Earth the story was set, the more honestly it could talk about Earth. Fact 8. The budget forced extraordinary creativity and accidentally invented the flip phone. Star Trek's production budget was extremely tight and got tighter every season. The same planet surface set was redressed and reused constantly, different lighting, different colored rocks, to suggest an entirely new world each week. The communicator, the handheld flip-open communication device carried by every crew member, was a direct visual inspiration for the flip phone. Motorola designer Martin Cooper has explicitly cited Star Trek as the inspiration for his team's work on the first handheld mobile phone in 1973. A prop built on a tight budget to suggest future technology accidentally helped invent a device that billions of people would carry in their pockets 30 years later. A network that tried to kill Spock before the show aired. A kiss that required sabotaging the alternate take. And a show that was never profitable during its entire original run. We're not halfway through. Still coming. The network that turned Star Trek down before NBC. The complicated truth about Shatner and Nimoy off camera. And the bonus, the letter campaign that changed television history and what NBC did to punish the show for surviving it. Fact 9. Leonard Nimoy wrote 2 books about being Spock, with opposite titles. The Vulcan ears required approximately 3 hours of makeup every single shooting day. Beyond the physical inconvenience, Nimoy spent years navigating the psychological challenge of playing a character so completely that audiences identified him with Spock rather than with Leonard Nimoy the actor. He eventually wrote 2 autobiographies about the tension. The first, published in 1975, was called I Am Not Spock. The second, published in 1995, was called I Am Spock. The titles tell the story of a 20-year journey toward making peace with the role that had defined him. Fact 10. DeForest Kelley was originally considered for Spock. Before Nimoy was cast, DeForest Kelley, who ultimately played Dr. McCoy, was among the actors considered for the Vulcan role. The 2 characters could not be more temperamentally different. Spock defined by logic, McCoy by passion and instinct. Kelley's casting as McCoy instead created the dynamic that became the show's philosophical engine. Spock and McCoy arguing about logic versus humanity while Kirk mediated between them was the template for hundreds of episodes. The accidental rightness of that casting is one of the more remarkable happy accidents in television history. Fact 11. The show predicted technology with remarkable consistency. Beyond the communicator, Star Trek's imagined technology has an almost uncomfortable track record. Tablets resembling iPads appear as standard crew equipment. Voice-activated computers respond to natural language decades before Siri or Alexa. The medical scanner used by Dr. McCoy inspired real research into handheld diagnostic devices. Roddenberry wasn't predicting technology, he was describing what he thought technology should become. Engineers and designers who watched the show as children built careers trying to make it real. Fact 12. CBS rejected Star Trek before NBC picked it up. Before NBC commissioned the pilot, Roddenberry had pitched Star Trek to CBS. CBS passed. They were already developing their own science fiction series, Lost in Space, which they felt covered the territory adequately. Lost in Space ran for 3 seasons, generated modest merchandise, and is remembered today primarily by dedicated fans of 1960s television. Star Trek was rejected by CBS, canceled by NBC after 3 seasons, and went on to generate an estimated $10 billion in franchise revenue across 6 decades. The network that said no made, in retrospect, one of the more consequential decisions in television history. Fact 13. Shatner and Nimoy had a complicated off-screen relationship. The chemistry between Kirk and Spock, the warmth beneath the professional formality, the genuine mutual respect, was not always mirrored by the actors playing them. Shatner's reputation on set was for being intensely focused on his own screen time. George Takei and Nichelle Nichols both wrote critically about his behavior in their memoirs. Nimoy maintained a more measured public stance but acknowledged tensions over the years. The friendship audiences believed in, real enough to carry 6 feature films, was a performance built by 2 professionals who understood what they were making, even when they didn't always make it easy for each other. Fact 14. The show changed what science fiction was allowed to be. Before Star Trek, American science fiction on television was largely aimed at children, rocket ships, ray guns, bug-eyed monsters. The genre was considered juvenile entertainment, not a vehicle for serious ideas. Star Trek changed that assumption permanently. Roddenberry treated science fiction as a form that could carry genuine moral weight. Stories about what humanity was capable of at its best, set against the backdrop of what humanity was demonstrably doing at its worst in the 1960s. Every serious science fiction series that followed, from Battlestar Galactica to The Expanse to Black Mirror, owes something to the argument Star Trek made, that the genre could think, and that thinking was worth the audience's time. Fact 15. The show was canceled twice, and syndication made it immortal. NBC canceled Star Trek after Season 2, reversed course after the fan letter campaign, and then immediately moved the show to a Friday night death slot at 10 p.m. with a severely reduced budget. Most of the original creative team left in protest. The 3rd season suffered visibly as a result. NBC canceled the show again at the end of Season 3. Then syndication began. Local stations purchased cheap rerun rights and broadcast episodes multiple times per week across different markets. Ratings in syndication were consistently stronger than the original network run had ever achieved. A new generation of viewers discovered the show. Then another. The audience kept growing after the show had stopped being made. By the time the first feature film arrived in 1979, 10 years after cancellation, there was a franchise waiting for it. Built not by a network, but by viewers who refused to let it go. And now the bonus I've been saving for last. When NBC announced the cancellation of Star Trek after Season 2, something happened that had never happened before in the history of American television. The audience fought back and won. B.J.O. Trimble, a science fiction fan and convention organizer, coordinated a letter-writing campaign after learning of the cancellation through fan community contacts. She and her husband compiled mailing lists, contacted fan clubs, and personally wrote to fans asking them to send letters to NBC. The campaign generated approximately 115,000 letters, an enormous volume by 1968 standards, when mass audience coordination required physical effort rather than a retweet. NBC reversed the cancellation. Star Trek got its 3rd season. Then the network moved it to Friday at 10 p.m. and cut the budget so severely that most of the original creative team resigned in protest. The 3rd season has generally been considered the weakest of the 3. The fans had saved the show. The network punished it for being saved. But here's what makes the story matter beyond the television industry. The fan letter campaign for Star Trek was one of the earliest examples of organized fandom mobilizing to influence a corporate decision. The infrastructure Trimble and others built, the mailing lists, the conventions, the sense of community among viewers who had never met each other, became the template for every fan campaign that followed. Star Trek fans invented the modern concept of organized fandom. They did it in 1968 with stamps and envelopes to save a show about humanity's hopeful future from a network that couldn't see past the next ratings report. The show got canceled anyway, but by then, it didn't matter. Syndication was already doing what NBC couldn't. The mission had already begun.